I wish I could speak to you in your own language, but I struggle enough with my own. So we'll see how we go. So we're at the end, and my colleagues and I from the Institute remarked on how many of you are still here. That's a real testament to your dedication to this work. It's not always so, particularly on a sunny Friday morning. So thank you for staying. So we're going to talk today, at the end of our time together, about when you think about quality, when you think about transformation of healthcare and health, what does it take? So I have the privilege of working in Scotland and the UK and Denmark, where we're working on improving the safety and quality of care for every citizen of those countries. So thinking across entire spectrum of care, governments, payers, institutions, all of it. So I think I have a small sense of where you are in your journey. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So the very first thing when you start this work is to commit to the journey. I know that sounds like, of course, that's what we would do, but it isn't always the case. So when you commit to this, when you make a decision to go fully into improving care for the citizens of your countries, then you have to really say, I'm going to be fully involved in this and not sit on the sidelines. So one of the things that this begins with is to think about the aims. So these are the aims. You may remember at the very first, Don Berwick talked about the IOM aims. We translated these at the Institute because we thought those aims were important, but they didn't really speak to the heart. So when we talk about safety, these are the aims that we discussed. No needless death, no needless harm, no waste, no helplessness, no waiting, and equity for everyone. So these are the aims that the first two in red are the ones that I spend most of my time on. No needless death or reducing mortality, or no needless harm or reducing harm to patients. So when you think about the aims that you'll set, thinking about developing aims that matter and that speak to the people who you are trying to help are extremely important. So you may have heard us say this before, but when we set aims, we always say they have this quality: how much by when. So often people will say, well, our aim is to reduce mortality. Well, in my lifetime, in the next 50 years, by next week, how much? By 10%, 15%, 2%? So when you set an aim, and this is very challenging, particularly at a country level, it takes some risk. It takes real leadership. So when the Secretary of Health in Scotland said we will reduce mortality by 15% in 4 years, that was a real risk. Because just like everywhere, governments are elected, they're held to their promises, and that was a very big risk, but we had spent a lot of time looking and thinking about it together and believed it was possible and thought it was really important to send a message that we aren't going to just tweak the current system we have. You could get a 2%, 3%, 4% improvement in mortality by tweaking the current system. And that's not what our intention was. Our intention was to fundamentally change the safety and quality for the people of Scotland in every healthcare setting. So that set a very high bar. But I would ask you to do the same when you're thinking about aims. When you say this is what we want to achieve, whether it's the triple aim, which is very important, but each of those triple aims, each of those aims in the triple aim require a specific aim. We're going to improve healthcare. How much by when? We're going to improve the experience of care. How much by when? We're going to improve cost per capita, or cost. How much and by when? Because putting that stake in the ground both starts a clock ticking that gets you moving. If there is no ticking clock, time goes on forever. And we may get there or we may not. But we talk a lot about this at the Institute. We talk about the tempo of change as being very important, extremely important. So tempo can be very slow or it can be fast. But the tempo that you set with those aims changes everything. How people work, how they see the work, how they come together, the kind of urgency that they feel around it. So I would say, set those aims boldly, and there are no aim police who are going to come and arrest you if you don't make it. So when we set that aim in Scotland at 15%, there was a lot of talk. Maybe we should go to 10%. Maybe we should go, because that's safer. And we said, no, let's go to 15%. What's the worst that can happen? What if we only make it to 12? Well, that's fantastic. That's still a remarkable outcome. So, but if we're too tame, we'll send a message to the service that really we're not all that serious, and we were extremely serious. So talk about a few things about components for effective communication. You know, these things fly in and out. I don't know how to stop it. I don't know when I did this or how I did it, but anyway, there it is. So you've heard a lot about will, ideas, and execution. So I won't spend a lot of time on that, except to say it is extremely important that you have all three. There is not a person who smokes cigarettes who doesn't know that smoking cigarettes is bad for them. I can give them 100 ideas of how to quit smoking and all kinds of execution. I can buy them gum. I can buy nicotine in the patch. I can give them a support group. All kinds of execution strategies. If they do not have the will at that time to quit smoking, all of it is for nothing. So building will is extremely important, and I think it's something we do poorly at the start. So thinking about data and stories and experiences, those things tend to build will. So I want to talk to you for a moment about an extremely important will-building moment in the United States, and I think maybe for the world. And it was a speech that John Kennedy, our then president, made. And he said this: we choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and to do the other things too, not because they are easy, but because they are hard, because the goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one which we intend to win in all the others too. So his point was there were all kinds of other things going on, and people were counseling him, don't make this commitment. They're all, you know, we had the war on poverty, a very big program in the United States, all kinds of other problems going on, Cuban Missile Crisis behind all of this, and he said, no, we're going to commit to this, because only by committing to it all the way will we develop the systems and processes we need to actually do it. So it was a galvanizing moment, because the people in NASA were having a heart attack at that moment, knowing that they were, in fact, going to be the ones to go to the moon and not John F. Kennedy. So let's think for a minute about how he did that, how it happened. Once he set that in motion, what happened? So thinking about will, ideas, and execution. So the first thing were the scientists at NASA really were not sure, naturally, how to do this. So they built three different models, three methods of reaching the moon, and they call these the flight modes. And they were hotly debated during the early days of the Apollo planning. So their ideas were those three flight modes. How would they know? There is no small test of change when you're going to the moon. So they all had to be simulated and discussed and thought about very, very strongly. And it was a very big issue at the time. So they had their ideas. Now here's the day of the launch. Here's execution. Many of you have seen movies where you see the control room at Cape Canaveral, from whence it left. And here's what execution looks like for them. It is precise, it is planned, it is simulated, and everything is done as much as can be in advance. And there's the system goal, walking on the moon. So everything we're thinking about, will, ideas, and execution are not in service of one small thing. They're in service of a large system goal, like improving mortality for a country, improving mortality for a hospital system, improving harm rates for patients. So all of that came together. I want to make a distinction now with you about what that entails, because I think we get stuck sometimes in what I would refer to as project thinking. So here's a project. Someone had to design and build the lunar module. That's a project. Someone's often doing that. So think of that as improving catheter-associated infections. That's one piece of reducing mortality and harm. One thing. So often I'll say to people, so I hear you're working on reducing harm. And they'll name me one or two projects. Those are projects. That is not a full program. But a program is made of projects. So there's a project right there. So we could think of this as on-time pre-op antibiotics. Here's a program. It's all put together now. Maybe some of you have actually been to Cape Canaveral, where they take the space shuttle out of its, this building in which it's built, and they move it slowly on a railroad bed toward the launch site. And it takes a long time. As one can imagine, you do not want to push this multi-million, billion-dollar machine too fast and have it fall over. I think that would be a career-ending move for anybody. So one piece of the one-part project is on-time antibiotics. The program in which it sits is reducing surgical complications. That's one thing you do to reduce surgical complications. There are many more, many more. So here's the Very Large System aim, going to the moon. Okay? So when it all came together, all the pieces, there it was. So they had will, ideas, and execution. They thought of all of the projects, what it looked like as a program, and how they would get to that full system. So for us, thinking about what are the projects that lead to a program of work, that lead to a large system aim, is important thinking. So here's a structure I'm proposing that we use at the Institute. It's one of many, and you may have others that work better for you. So when we think about this, we think at the very top is a very large system. And what would the aim be for a very large system? The mesosystems underneath are those components that make it up. So you may be a 3-hospital system. You may be a 3-hospital and 5-clinic system. The point is this. When you set a large system aim, reducing harm by 15%, you have to think about all of those building blocks. What will the hospital be doing? See the projects underneath? What are the projects that the hospital will be doing to lead to that large system aim for Scotland? If you are here from a hospital, you have to think about what are the projects at each of the different units that will add up to something at the end of the day, not be freestanding projects. Right now, I think we suffer from projectitis. We have project after project after project. The front line does not know what are these for. So today you're asking me to do this, and tomorrow you're asking me to assess patients for venous thrombotic events. Why? I don't know a person who got a VTE. Why am I going to do this? We fail to win the hearts and minds of the front line by sharing this with them, helping them understand they are part of a very large system of work, that their work matters, that at the end of the day, this is what it contributes to, and that how important nothing will improve if the nexus of care between the patient and the provider does not improve. That is where improvement happens. So we talk about the Donabedian framework, which I think is very, very helpful, and that is structure and process equal outcome. So it is the leader's job expressly to set up the structures that will allow the staff to do the work they need to do to drive the processes of care. Nothing we do will change if we cannot get that right. We must help our staff understand why they are doing it, give them some time and space and skills to do that work, or else hope is the plan. And I love hope. I think hope's a beautiful thing, but it is no plan. So whenever you hear yourself saying, I hope this works, you know you're probably pretty light on the plan side. So here's the system. So in this schema that I've put together, the very large system that we're trying to affect is medication safety. What we're trying to do, if I had the aim up here, would be to reduce adverse events by 30%. And the hospitals have things they need to work on. The rehab center have things they need to work on, the office. And when we work on these, we build them right out so every patient care unit knows what they have to work on, every clinic, every rehab, and together they are pulling toward the same aim. And if you don't explicate the system, you get a lot of interesting small results, this one on intensive care, this one over here in rehab, but it doesn't add up to anything transformative. It has to be laid out in a systematic way and help the staff understand why they're going there, and then the projects actually lead to something. So, hospital medication safety, same thing. So, we talked about what you need to do. You need to commit to the journey. You need to think about the system you're trying to improve. And it's important to have a theory. We talk a lot about this at the Institute, the importance of theory. But the theory is this. My theory here is that when we do all of those projects, we'll move the big dot, or we'll move harm for the patients. That's a theory. How do I come to that? I do a lot of research and say, gee, what projects out there actually reduce harm? And how, when we add them together, can we come up with something truly important? So that's a very important piece for us. Have a theory, learn what other people are doing, the impact of it, put together a system. Now, the next one is learn about your performance. A lot of you know about measurement, you hear about measurement. I just think we cannot stress this enough. Learning, if you do not know what you are, where you currently are, it's like asking me to get in a car and drive to Bogota. Don't give me a map, no speedometer, just get in the car and drive. I will be driving. There will be activity, but there will be very little positive change. I cannot get to that goal without knowing where I am and how to get there. And our staff are driving blind. How many of them really know the effect of the care they're giving today? So we're asking them to work on, I'll pick a project, urinary catheters. Or trying to reduce urinary catheter infections, which, by the way, are the #1 cause of sepsis in our hospitals. #1, lest we think it's not a very important goal. People will always say to me, we're working on sepsis, and I say, that's great. You must be working on urinary catheter care. Oh, no. Well, then, how are you working on sepsis? Are you working on it once they get it? How about we work upstream and actually prevent it? That would be great. So, when we think about this, if we are working on this, how does the staff understand the changes they're making and the impact on the outcome? Do they get that data every day? Do they collect it themselves so that they can see the impact of what they're doing? So when I say learn about your performance, what I don't mean is a report that comes back to you 3 months late after the fact, and you're able to look in the rear. It's like driving, looking in the rearview mirror. It's very difficult to do, and I suspect very dangerous. I've never tried it, but seems like a bad idea. So how do you do this? How will you do this? And I think people often think, oh, we'll have to have a big IT system, and it's very complicated. And in fact, when I work with people all the way from the Minister of Health to folks on the front line, and I'm talking with folks on the front line, and they say we have no time to measure. In fact, what you can do is you can say, okay, today, what I want is the 5 of the staff on, I want you to go look at one chart and tell me what we were trying to do, did it happen today? And you come back, and the denominator is 5, and you tell me, were we 4 out of 5, 3 out of 5? What did we get today? Maybe today you are supposed to chart something, a particular change. And we can easily know at the end of the day, how successful were we? How successful were we today? So one of the things that we have staff working on a great deal of the time around the world is a thing called an early warning scoring system. And that is a place where the staff put their vital signs and it allows them to know, is the patient deteriorating? It helps send a signal that they then can act on. If you want to know if the staff are doing this correctly, I send out the 5 staff, they look at 5 charts and come back. Now, I am a doctorally trained statistician. Do I think there is statistical power with 5? No, I do not. But I can tell you this, never let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And knowing what we do on 5 randomly controlled, randomly selected charts every single day, by the end of the week I have 35 data points, and I certainly know if we're improving or not. That is what they need. Are we getting better? Are we not getting better? So systems knowledge is not just about at the top. It is also right where the care is being given. We must do better with this, and we can. That's the good news. We really can. So also, people who were in my mini course yesterday, they could get up and give this talk. In fact, I see some of you. Maybe I'll ask. They may leave shortly. So one of the things you could do is to understand why patients die in your hospital. So many of you had people who were in my course yesterday, and they could tell you about this. What you do is you review the last 50 consecutive deaths, and you look at them this way. You look at them to say, on 2 axes, were they admitted for palliative care, end-of-life care, or were they admitted to the ICU? Not during their stay, but directly. And what we find in box 1 is that patients who come in for end-of-life care and die in the ICU, that is a difficult place to die in a poor use of resources. But what percentage of your patients have died there? Box 2, is this the best place for patients to die? They were admitted for palliative care and they were admitted to a general ward. Is that really the best place and the best use of resources? Could we not think about hospice care? The most important box is box 4. These are people who did not come in for end-of-life care and yet they died on one of your general wards. They had no expectation of dying and yet they did, and of that 50 deaths, you will find at least 50% in box 4. This is an easy exercise, relatively easy. Staff can be trained to do this very simply. We have all the materials we'll give you for free. But if you want to understand where you are and where you need to improve, this is a great place to start. What we find, sadly, is it is not one diagnostic group. Wouldn't it be easy if when you did that 2-by-2 table, you found in box 4 1 or 2 diagnoses? Patients with community-acquired pneumonia. We can fix that. That is not what you'll find, sadly. What you will find is a failure to recognize, a failure to plan, and a failure to communicate. And all of these can be fixed. But you need to know where you are. If you are driving to Bogota, you need to know what road you are on. If you are trying to reduce mortality, you need to know where mortality happens. That is the job of leadership. Okay, so what else do you need to do? Measure harm and share the data. So I said this yesterday and I'll say it again, self-reported harm rates are notoriously unreliable. They're a good measure of safety culture, but please do not tell me you are collecting data on adverse events using a self-reported tool. It is not reliable, it is not valid. What you'll get are some interesting things, but we will not get what you can take to the bank as a reliable measure of what harm you have in your organization. What you'll get is a reliable measure of how often people report harm. That's what you have. Not that that's a bad thing, that's an important thing, but it is no measure of harm. And people will say, well, we'll go to the Joint Commission Never events. They are rare and important, but they capture very little harm from everyday care. So cutting off the wrong body part, gee, that is very important. Operating on the wrong body part, very important. These are things that should never happen and do, but this is not the day-to-day harm that's happening to our patients and our organizations. It is the small things, the defects in care, the infections, the surgical complications, the pressure ulcers. These are the complications we see all the time. So being transparent with the data, this is a journey. This doesn't start, and it isn't easy, but we had these conversations all the time. Put up what your defect rates are. So we have in several of the places, a lot of the places we work, the staff have put up a board, and it's erasable, and every day they do report in front of it, and they say, okay, what is our pressure ulcer rate? What is our surgical site infection rate? And they use that data to direct their care every day. And you know, that's in the public hallway. And there was a lot of angst about this. Oh my gosh. The one I love is, our patients will know our care isn't perfect. Believe me, people, this is the worst kept secret in the world. They already know this. There's not a person you can't talk to who doesn't know someone who's been harmed in a hospital. No one. This is not a secret. So when you put it up there, believe me, I wish the patients paid more attention to it. They pay almost no attention to it. They walk by it, they sometimes ask a few questions, they're glad you're working on it, they're glad you're looking at it, and they're really relieved that we're talking about it. So this notion of transparency as frightening patients, as causing litigation, is nonsense. It has not played out time and time again. What it does is change the culture, though. It changes it from one of secrecy to one of openness and discussion, where we can say, we are not perfect, but we are getting better, we're working at it, and we must know our performance. How else can we improve? So commit to developing a culture of safety. That's another piece, but the one we just talked about, it goes a long way to this. People will say, well, we're going to work on safety. We're going to work on a culture of safety. What exactly are you doing, by the way? You don't just walk in and say, oh, today we're working on a culture of safety. Culture is defined as the way we do business here. If the way we do business is transparent, we measure and talk about our results, we think together about, in a team-based working, how we're going to go forward, that is the culture. If you have no standards, or you have standards and no one is asked to use them, that is the culture. You have already defined it. There is a culture existent. If you want to improve it, you have to think, you have to improve how we do business here. Yesterday we talked a good deal in our course about the hierarchy and how difficult it is to speak up, particularly doctor to nurse, which is often a male-female hierarchy as well, which is makes it more complicated, but it's often true. And we talked about, you don't wait till you're in the heat of the battle to plan a strategy. You do that in advance. You say, let's agree this is difficult. How might we make it better in service of our patients? I'm going to pretend I don't have someone taking my picture right here to my left, but okay. So you need to think, what are those things that impact culture? If it's teamwork, then work on teamwork. If it is reporting, work on reporting. If it's transparency, you have to think of those things that are going to impact your culture. Don't bother showing up and saying, I'm going to work on culture if you aren't committed to those things. So you have to look into your own heart and say, are we willing to go on that journey? Is that a journey like John Kennedy you are willing to commit to because you are unwilling to put it off any longer? Because we can only get so far without that. We can improve all the processes in the world. If we do not change the culture in which the rampant defects live, we will not improve over time. We must. And you can. That's the good news. So, what's a safety culture? An environment where everyone knows what the plan is. That would be great. No one is ever hesitant to voice a concern about a patient. Even yesterday when I asked this question in my class, I said, you are a nurse and you are assisting a doctor in putting in a central line and you see that that doctor contaminates the catheter. What should you do? And the answer was, well, let him do it and tell him afterward. Well, we all say no because we are not standing there at that patient's bedside. What do? This is the defining moment in a culture. What do? We don't want to embarrass the doctor. We don't want to make the patient anxious. What do? What we do is this. We plan for that in advance. We say to one another, there will be times when we will be in front of a patient and we see something go wrong. How shall we manage that? And we talk about it there. But I can tell you the answer that was given is the answer I have seen all over the world, not just Colombia. All over the world. There is a great fear in speaking up. A fear of embarrassment, a fear of shame, a fear of frightening the patient. So these things have to be managed. That is what a safety culture is. So here's an evolution of a safety culture, and I like this. All the way from the bottom, where it's pathological, who cares as long as we're not caught? It's known as chronically complacent. And believe me, this is a model that accreditation can build. That notion that Don Berwick talked about, the moving van coming before accreditation and loading everything in, that was my hospital. I was vice president there. It wasn't. He wasn't ever at my hospital, but that's what we did. We changed nothing. We just hired a moving van to come pick up all the junk, take it away, and we actually had walkie-talkies. So we would say, if they've just been to this floor, we would call to the next floor and say, okay, floor 2, they've just looked at X, Y, and Z, check X, Y, and Z, they're coming your way. And if any of you have to go through accreditation, I can tell you that works. So, nonetheless, accreditation, I'm not suggesting it's a bad model, it's not. It's just necessary but not sufficient. So it is much more than not being caught. So to reactive, and I'm asking you, think about where you are today. You don't need to say anything to anybody. Think in your own heart. Safety is important. We do a lot every time we have an accident. So we are up to our eyeballs in root cause analysis. We're spending so much time driving with the rearview mirror that it's hard to look forward. The third, calculative. We have systems in place to manage hazards. Again, we are not eliminating the hazards, we're just managing around them. So that's good, but not enough. All the way up to proactive and generative. And believe me, there aren't many places that are there yet, but lots of people are talking about it and working hard at trying to be. Anticipating and preventing problems before they occur. This can happen tomorrow on a patient care unit. A team can get together and say, what are the things at the beginning of the shift in 10 minutes, what are the things we are worried about today and what can we do about them before they happen? These things can be done, they can be managed, things can change, and it doesn't have to be at the large system. It can be anywhere and everywhere. The last, or I think next to last perhaps, is designing reliable systems of care. So right now, we don't have, our systems honestly have been built, most of them, sort of one thing on another. Because we can't close a hospital and say, well, we're not delivering care this month, we're going to redesign our processes. So we have to build the airplane while we're flying it, and that's a hard job. So actually designing processes is something we don't do a lot of. And you'll hear a lot of people talking about lean and lean processes, and that's a way to go back and redesign. That's one method. There's all kinds of methods. But actually being thoughtful in designing a process. We have a half a day workshop where we work with teams and we redesign a process in less than that time. There is this notion that you must have an enormous multidisciplinary team. They must meet for weeks. Well, weeks would be short. Months, maybe years to design this. And then they come out with it, probably not tested yet, and they lay it out and everybody looks at it and says, I'm not doing that. And we think, how is that possible? We have spent a year designing this process, but it wasn't tested. We never asked the people at the front line. And honestly, we will say this. We had a doctor on that committee. Excuse me, did that doctor actually look at his colleagues and say, well, colleagues, I'm here to represent you, so whatever I say on this committee goes, right? You're all agreeing to that, right? Of course not. He's representing himself or herself. He's given you his learned opinion. But that's what you've got, an opinion of one. And you roll this thing out, and people say, not going there. And we're all upset. We've spent all this time. Don't do that. Don't do that. Get a few people together, spend half a day doing it, and then try it, and you'll learn so much that way and waste so little time that it'll give people energy instead of taking it away from them. Measurement for safety. We've talked an awful lot about that. This is a really important one, a characteristic of improvement that cannot be missed, and that is becoming a continuous learning organization. So I hope all of you commit to this adios infections, adios bacteremias. I hope you commit to that. That's a great and fun journey. And it's also true that in order to do this well, you'll need to learn. Because what you will find is you'll be trying this on 7 different units, 7 places. Unit 1 will be spectacular. They'll do a great job. Others need to learn from them. If you do not have a way to notice that they're doing well, harvest what they're doing, and teach others, everybody will just plod along at their own rate. And that's one way to do it. I'd suggest that's the way we do it now. But a learning organization will push you faster, help you learn, help you change. So you need a noticing system. Who's doing well? You need measures for that. What are they doing? How are they doing it? How do we help the others learn to do it that way? This learning system is very important. So continuous learning organizations have a method to learn and improve care, a standard method to learn about adverse events and near misses. There's a method to identify best practices. You know, inside your hospital, here's the thing. We are islands of excellence in a sea of mediocrity. There are people in your hospital who are excellent. They're just not everywhere. Why not? Why don't we take the best of what is in each of your clinics, in your rehab centers, in your hospitals, and say, this is the new standard? And everybody will rise to that. They're right in your house. And you know this is true because if I say to you, you've got a phone call, your wife, your husband, your grandmother, or your child is ill, where would you like them to go in your hospital and be treated by whom? You'll have an answer. And it won't be this. Oh, anywhere, they're all the same. They're all equally good. All the doctors and nurses are equally good because they're not. That's the variation we're tolerating right now. Why? We don't need to. We don't need to. We could say, who's the best, and let's set that as the bar for ourselves. That's what excellence is going to look like for us. That's what improving is going to look like for us. And it can. So I want to share with you a few of the data that we've collected over a few years from Scotland. This is a whole country. This is every hospital in the country. So here are our goals. So right now, we have a year left, and we're at, actually, this is at 11 now, thank goodness. It was at 9.3 when I got this graph, but I just got the new data yesterday, and it's now at 11. So we still have a ways to go in a year, and we may not make it. But you know what? I bet we'll make it to 13% at least, and that's a whole lot better than it was for a whole country. Here's the VAP rate now, the ventilator-acquired pneumonia rate. Here's the central line infection rate now. This is in the whole, every country, every ICU, every general ward in the country. Here's ICU mortality. Here's the general ward C. difficile rate. Here's the general ward SAB rate. This is for Staph aureus bacteremias. So I ask you this. What is your level of your ambition? Is it a project? Is it a program? Is it a large system aim? A little improvement for some, a lot of improvement for some, or unprecedented improvement for everyone. So let's go to the moon. Thank you.